4 years ago when the Trump administration came in, we had a hard time keeping up with all of the good stuff they were doing. I mean, we had to create a list, a running list, because it was nonstop. They moved quickly, and they did a lot of good stuff, a lot. Well, the same can be said for the Biden administration, except it's not good stuff. It's bad stuff, and they're doing a lot of it, and we're talking about it. And I know that some are saying, wow, what are we going to do? People are getting discouraged. Well, I want to put all this in perspective. That's why we had State Representative Barry Fleming on, because a lot of good stuff is happening at the state level. Now, there's not a lot of good stuff happening here. And don't expect there to be any good stuff happening here in Washington, because you've got Joe Biden, one of the most pro-abortion presidents. Probably, I think he's going to eclipse Obama in terms of being pro-abortion. And, of course, Kamala Harris, the vice president. And, of course, he's pushing the LGBTQ agenda like there's no tomorrow. So don't expect anything good from the Biden administration. You've got Nancy Pelosi running the House, narrow margin of control, but she's got control with an iron fist. So don't expect anything good to come out of the House. And the Senate, Chuck Schumer is the majority leader with Kamala Harris backing him up. So don't expect anything good to come out of the Senate. The best thing we can hope for the Senate is nothing comes out of it at all. That's the hope because of the filibuster rule. So we look to the states for what is good, but just like last night, we saw one Democratic member from Mississippi who defected from the Democratic caucus and voted against H.R. 1, this sweeping election law that we talked about earlier. And so why did he do that? It's very interesting. He responded to the media and said, well, my constituents didn't support it. It's because folks in his district called him and said, bad idea, don't support it. And so your voice still matters. Our republic, as I've said many times, is not for spectators. It's for participants. So what can you do? Joining me now to talk about all of this, Travis Weber, Vice President of Policy and Government Affairs here at FRC. Travis, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Tony.
So let's just start with well, I guess we'll just take our pick. There's so much to pick from. But let's start with H.R. 1, the election law that we were just talking about with State Representative Fleming. What can people, our listeners, do as it pertains to election integrity and what is happening here in Washington and across the country?
Yeah, so Tony, I think there's several things they can do. One, although this bill passed the House by narrow margin, there was a lot of Republican opposition to it. It's going to the Senate now. They can make sure their senators understand that this bill is it's not to be tolerated. And they oppose the bill. Their senators should oppose the bill. And we have a resource up at frcaction.org/HR1. They can go there, send a message to their senators. At the same time, as you mentioned, to be encouraged by the state level activity. We have a lot of resources up as well on FRC Action's page showing where folks can see what is happening on the question of election integrity across the country and at the state level.
So two action items here on this as it pertains to election integrity. And quite frankly, folks, I think this is one of the most important issues. I mean, there's a lot of important issues, but we've got to get this one right because we've got to make sure we have fair and free elections. It's the only way our voice really counts. So that's why I'm encouraged by the fact that 43 states have introduced over 250 bills, many of them dealing with these election irregularities. So you need to find out what your state is doing. There's resources available for that. We're working on more resources, working in a coalition of other organizations. But check out the website, frc.org. Where exactly will they find that?
Tony, that's on FRC Action's homepage. If they go to frcaction.org/takeaction, it's all there, okay. And the election integrity stuff's there as well.
So there you know what is happening in your state, and you need to weigh in with your state representatives, your state senators. And then you may be in a state where you've got, a Democratic senator, two Democratic senators. You say, what's the use? Still, weigh in with them on this. Hold them accountable, but also don't let them say they haven't heard from their constituents. Email them. I would encourage you, those that are in states where you've got moderate Democratic senators, Arizona, West Virginia, weigh in with your senators and encourage them to protect the right of the states, the constitutional authority granted to the states to establish election systems. This is an important one, and we need your voice in it. Let's talk about the Equality Act, which also passed the House last week and is over in the Senate. What can people do there?
Yeah, so Tony, Equality Act again passed in the House by pretty narrow margins, 224 to 206. Only 3 Republicans voting for it this year, down from 8 last year. That shows that we're getting to them in terms of they understand there's issues. The people are not going to stand for the Republican base. This moves to the Senate now. Again, people can let their senators know unacceptable. We understand now, based on what we're doing here in D.C. and our work with the Hill, the Senate may have a hearing on this. It's possible we could see a hearing in a few weeks. However, they also procedurally have moved to make it possible to put it on the floor for a vote, therefore making this action step a little more urgent. We have an alert up at our homepage as well, frcaction.org/Equality Act. People can go there, send a message to their senators. Equality Act, people know why it's bad. We've kind of detailed.
But let's talk about it. I don't want to take for granted. We might have folks listening that haven't heard the discussion because, again, I said this earlier in the program, people are going to hear stuff on here that they don't hear anywhere else because the mainstream media, and I include the cable news networks with the exception of OAN and Newsmax, but even Fox is going to give the talking points that make these things look favorable. And this Equality Act, of course it's misnamed, it should be the Inequality Act. It turns science and reason on its head. This allows, the redefinition. It forces a redefinition of sex, of biology, the biological reality of male and female. It forces it on people. It promotes abortion because that's a part of this. But the big issue is that it puts religious freedom and the ability to live your faith, to teach your faith to your children in the crosshairs.
It does, Tony. Religious freedom, there's a host of ways it does this. It guts RFRA, makes the Religious Freedom Restoration Act inapplicable to the application of the Equality Act. It changes public accommodation laws in a way that excludes religious organizations, religious business owners from protections they would otherwise have. So basically imposes sexual ideology through the mandate of the Equality Act, what they're terming non-discrimination laws. And as you note, the Equality Act is misnamed. So it's important people understand how this is very slickly named to connote something which sounds good, but it's very devious when you look underneath it. So religious liberty, those areas, in addition to affecting faith-based institutions, adoption agencies, religious educational organizations, possibly even churches when it comes to their place in the public square and opening their facility up for use to the public, it could affect their freedom to do that.
Well, for instance, a church that is open, and most churches are open to the public, whoever wants to can come in, this could affect their bathroom policy.
Right. So, of course, churches want to be able to welcome everyone, but they don't want to be forced to change their beliefs against their conscience. It could affect their ability to determine how to set up their facilities, including bathrooms, how and what ceremonies to host, including wedding ceremonies in their venue.
Right. So if they allow outside other than the members to use their facilities for weddings, they could be susceptible to this.
Right. And there's areas we're not even going to be able to name right now, but fall under the umbrella of the religious freedom of these organizations.
Well, and we know what the left will do is that the activists will target these churches, these religious institutions, and push the issue. They'll push the envelope.
Yeah, they have already been doing this, and you see this in efforts that are coming behind the Equality Act, like Fairness for All, which is being positioned as a replacement or substitute, but in reality, it's very aggressive in its imposition on religious freedom. Does include some carve-outs, is different, but broadly includes these mandates, which you mentioned previously, upending biology, science on its head.
Well, I want to talk about that, the Fairness for All, because this is being put forward as a reasonable compromise.
Yeah.
And it's you cannot compromise on some things. And in part, I'll just say my read on the Fairness for All is essentially looking at religious freedom as something that religious institutions have, not American citizens.
I think that's a fair read of it. And to your point, there's two pieces of evidence that show that the compromise is not working. None of the major LGBT groups are backing this. They're not supportive. And no Democrats are co-sponsoring it in the House. So if this was a genuine compromise, you'd see the other side supporting it. That aside, it has incredible problems for religious freedom. It includes very small carve-outs here and there, is different from the Equality Act in that respect, and does not have the abortion problems of the Equality Act. But everything else is still bad.
Yeah, there's many things where you can reach middle ground that there can be compromise on, but what we're seeing increasingly when it comes to those pushing a radical redefinition of human sexuality, I mean, what you've done is you've departed from the truth, and therefore there can be no compromise. There's no common ground when you're dealing with truth and untruth. It's kind of like the Scripture says, what fellowship has light with darkness?
Yeah. And Tony, this is where it's so important to highlight the stories of people who've come out of lifestyles that have been furthered and where they've suffered harm as a result of these mandates. People who've said, look, I entered a transgender lifestyle. I wanted to live as a man, had surgery, yet I regret that, I want to come out of that. That approach is being mandated at all levels of government by things like the Equality Act. These people testify to the harm that caused them. That's just a matter of truth and reality.
But we don't even want to hear that. There's no platform for discussion. Anybody who raises that issue is basically canceled by the left.
They're canceled. They're called haters, even if that person's saying...
Right. If that person is the one who came out of the lifestyle saying, hey, wait a minute, I made a mistake. This was a horrible experience. Please don't lead people down this path. That person is a hater and a bigot.
They're a hater. They're being canceled. Yet we hear from the other side, hey, you want to erase us. Well, these people's stories are being erased when they're not even being heard. There's true erasure when we're talking about that term for these folks who they don't have a voice. I mean, they don't have a voice in today's world when you're standing up to the LGBT lobby.
It runs counter to nature, and it will never be. It's like the abortion issue. You know, you go back to the Roe v. Wade decision, 1973. You know, the court took that action saying we're going to solve this issue for the country. It is a bigger issue today than it was in 1973 because it's unnatural for a mother to take the life of her own child and society to applaud it or to approve it. The same is true of human sexuality. It is unnatural for a man to be a woman. It's unnatural for a woman to masquerade as a man. It's unnatural for two people of the same sex to be married. And it's unnatural for a society to approve of that. The only way that they can accomplish this, and they'll never totally accomplish it, but they know the only way they can do this is by repression and by silencing the opposition. And the opposition primarily is coming from people who know the truth, and that is people who subscribe to a biblical understanding of what human sexuality is.
Tony, I agree, and it's going to be more important than ever for us to continue to tell these stories, the stories of people who maybe want help even talking about a decision that they regret, where they went into a certain lifestyle. Bills are being put forth to even ban that kind of counseling and therapy, right. Talk therapy. When you look at that, that's evidence of the intolerance in every respect that you're talking about.
But the good news on this is while we see what's happening here in Washington, states across the country are pushing back on this. And so just as we have states introducing bills to reform our election system, we have states introducing bills to protect women's sports. We have bills being introduced to protect children from this surgical mutilation in the transgender movement.
Tony, it is encouraging. You look at the states. We're actually tracking 500 and something bills on marriage, family, and sexuality issues around the country, good bills. This issue specifically, 28 bills have been introduced protecting children against these types of procedures. A great one in Arkansas. We're looking at a hearing next week down there in that state. So there is an encouraging sign when you look at the states, the developments of what's going on these issues.
Can people find out more about that?
They can. They can come to frc.org and you'll find our issue pages where we'll talk more about those issues. And we can certainly, if they reach out and they can't find that information on our website, reach out to us. We'll get that information.
Yeah, just contact us at the website because we need your voice on these at the state level as well. This is how we get involved in it when we've got a bad national federal government. That's why the wisdom of our founders is seen in moments like this. We don't have to go the way of the Biden administration. We have 50 states in which we can work to counterbalance those bad actions. Travis Weber, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And folks, I want to thank you for being with us as well. And I do want to encourage you to check out the resources that are available for you. Go to TonyPerkins.com and you can follow the links over. We need your voice. Now is not the time to shrink back. It's not the time to be silent. It is time to speak truth, to speak it boldly, to speak it with courage and with clarity. And we want to help you do that. I also want to encourage you to encourage your friends to tune in and listen to Washington Watch. If it's not on a station near them, download the Stand Firm app in the App Store. Until next time, I leave you with the encouraging words the Apostle Paul found in Ephesians 6, where he says, when you've done everything you can do, when you've prayed, prepared, and taken your stand, by all means, keep standing.